What is the greatest completely legal loophole you know about? Story 1. I used to work for a credit processor, which is the company that handles the network your credit transactions move across. Swipe your card at a merchant, it goes to the credit processor, who determines which financial institution the card belongs to and authorizes or declines the charge through them, then reports back to the merchant. Anyway, one of our clients was a major bank, one you'd know. We were investigating a recurring network issue that we couldn't really pin down. Every month, this financial institution's network would strain and overload, around the same day and time, once a month. We didn't have any errors logged that weren't a result of this strain, no identifiable cause, no processes running at that time, they weren't doing maintenance, which was just a formality since the issue was on our network, so I'm idly watching transactions rolling across the big screen when it starts flooding with the same line. We got hit with something around 35,000 transactions all at once from the same source. Did some cross-referencing, and sure enough, we could see the same thing had happened every time the problem occurred, and always the same account. So we called the financial institution and explained it to them. They looked into it, and here's what they shared with us. They'd had a promotion going on for their bank card to award 100 bonus points every time someone used their bank card to pay their bills online. No minimum to that, no qualifier that the bill had to be paid in its entirety. So this guy wrote a script to pay $350 by 1-cent transactions and racked up bonus points on his bank card. So if you had that incentive and wonder why it went away, you can thank that guy. And me for narking him out, I guess. My friend did this once with Chase Freedom Card. Opened multiple cards, ran the script for single-cent transactions, and made out like a bandit before they caught on and closed his credit cards. Story 2. Want to get out of a contract you signed with a cellular service provider, such as Rogers or Bell, or for my American friends, Verizon, AT&T, etc.? A contract is a two-way street. You both have legally agreed to terms and conditions and have signed said contract to a legally binding agreement. If you wish to break the contract and cancel it, they charge you an early cancellation fee, potentially up to $500, $300 in Canada. If they charge something, you can notify the ombudsman of the company, or office of the president, in writing that you do not agree to the terms they have changed, and therefore the contract is voided before the next billing date. An example, did they increase their long-distance minutely rate by 1 cent, or their price per kilobyte for data overages? That's a change you didn't agree to, and it was not laid out in the terms you signed your contract for. Notify them of such, and they can either honor the pre-changed price for the length of the contract, or void the contract altogether. Most of the time they won't even respond, which means it terminates in your favor. Your contract is voided, and you don't have to pay any ECF or similar. You may be required to return any products, such as cell phones you have subsidized over the course of your contract, or pay out the cost of the phone, depending on the fine print in the subsidized device contract, a separate contract to the service agreement. It's worth adding to this that not every company writes their contracts very well. Look deeply enough, and you may find loopholes to exploit even before you feel like canceling your service. For instance, there was once a video of a guy talking to his provider about his bill and saying they'd overcharged him. I can't remember if it was for roaming usage, minutes, data, or what, but for every minute, they charged him a penny. The problem is that when they wrote this in the contract, they wrote it as 0.01 cents, which would be 1/100th of a penny. It's amazing how long it takes him to explain this. It's a bit of a lose-lose because you can only argue the same point for so long before you start sounding a little bit like a Karen. But if your provider ever makes this mistake, then you do have the right to hold them accountable if you feel like it. Story 3. This is on a much smaller scale than most things presented here, but I'm proud of it. My senior year in high school in Texas, 2002 to 2003, my friends and I found out that if you had too many absences, you had to make up for it during Saturday school. Well, it turns out that Saturday school is only half a day, and it makes up for 3 absences. So me and 3 other friends would constantly skip school. We didn't do sports, so we had all our credits anyway, well before the end of the year, and then on Friday nights have a LAN party and play Warcraft 3 or Star Wars Galaxies all night. The next morning, tired as heck, we'd drive to Saturday school and just kind of sit and stare or doze off for about 4 hours and have our absences erased. When I was in high school, our school tried using this tardy tracker system, which was full of such loopholes. Eventually, we realized that being 3 minutes late was marked the same as being up to 45 minutes late. After utilizing that a few times, administration was pretty ticked. I don't know how long they kept using that program, but it was a waste of time and money. Story 4. I rented a store last year, and we opened a small shop. It's in a small complex with 5 other shops. The owners of the property do not pay the bank for their loan, and it gets repossessed by the bank and put up for auction. These same guys go and buy it again at auction, but with a different company. They have several. At the auction, they have to come up with 20%, I think, and they pay that, but then nothing else. Yet they take the rental income this whole time. It takes about a year before repossession happens again, and they just repeat the same trick. The 20% they pay each time is way less than the rental income for a year, so they just keep on making this profit year after year. They have now done it twice since we started renting there. I don't know how long this has been going on. We spoke to the officer of the court at the last auction, and he admitted to knowing what was going on, but said that they're not breaking any laws other than not paying their debt. Story 5. You can game the free voucher for voluntary bumping at most airlines by intentionally booking yourself on a busy, earlier flight if you know that a less busy, later flight will get you to your destination at a reasonable time. It requires some knowledge of the schedules, but there are predictable flights that tend to get overbooked all the time. I used to fly a Friday commuter shuttle every week. I could easily make my connecting flight if I took the 7 p.m. shuttle into DC, but I would book the 5:30 flight instead. Every week, I'd be the first one to jump up when they asked for volunteers. In 1 year, I accumulated enough vouchers and free round-trip tickets to take my wife and kids with me to Hawaii twice. Best of all, I'd always ask for and receive meal vouchers, so I got to eat dinner for free while I waited for the flight I actually would have booked anyway. It ticked off some of the gate agents, but what could they do? They needed those seats. I'll be honest, I was expecting most of these to be sleazy and ill-advised, like those guys a couple stories ago whose greatest claim to fame is keeping themselves as uneducated as possible, but this is one that actually sounds like it might be worth using. You could say it's underhanded to game the system, but it's also unprofessional to consistently overbook your flights, so I think we're on even ground. The only thing I'd point out to anyone who might think of trying this is that you do run the risk of choosing an earlier flight that winds up not being overbooked. So if you're going to try it, you might want to make sure you have plans for what to do if you get to your destination early. Story 6. I lived in DC for many years. DC has a practice of refusing to issue parking tickets for Sunday churchgoers, most of whom don't even live in DC. This is an interesting cultural phenomenon unique to DC. Many black families moved to Maryland due to gentrification and other reasons, but have remained loyal to their churches. So my car has been blocked in many times, and the city refuses to do anything about it, effectively creating a religious free pass for parking violations. So one time I got a parking ticket, and I filed an appeal saying that I was at a religious service, even though it was a Tuesday night. I wound up doing this 3 times over the years. I didn't win, but all my tickets are still pending appeal, and one of them is from 2003. Pretty sure the city doesn't want to confront the quagmire they've created by refusing to enforce laws based on religious reasons. I told my friends about this, and several of them have done it as well. Story 7. I've earned over $90,000 by getting compensated by airlines. This is a simple trick that works well. If you know certain routes at your airport are always oversold, just buy a fully refundable fare a few days before the flight takes off. Usually this will be one or more of the oversold tickets. Just go to the airport and offer to give up your seat and reap the rewards. If not needed, just refund your ticket. Usually I book 12 to 18 tickets in one day and hit one after another up until my planned departure in the evening. I try to spread it across 5 or more airlines to avoid seeing the same staff. I fly for free everywhere in the world. Southwest has the best policy, usually $300 plus twice the value of your ticket. I have thousands of dollars of credit with all the airlines that I can't even use fast enough. Story 8. It's a pretty small loophole in the bigger scheme of things, but for a broke college student as myself, it's pretty important for me. We have an IHOP on campus. One of the most filling meals it offers comes with hash browns, choice of meat, 2 eggs, and 2 pancakes. It's around $10 for the whole thing. However, my college also offers a meal plan that allows us to swipe our college ID at certain restaurants for certain meals. For example, at that same IHOP, you can get hash browns, choice of meat, and 2 eggs for 1 swipe. Getting a side of 2 pancakes is $1.15. I've abused this quite a bit, as I'm getting a $10 meal for around $2. It might not be the biggest loophole out there, but dang is it a nice one. The talk about airlines in this story was starting to make me think of the pudding scam in Punch Drunk Love, so I guess it's fitting that we ran into one about food. To be honest, I mostly just want to know what college this OP goes to that has an IHOP right on campus. It's pretty normal for colleges to have their own eateries where you can use your ID card. At some schools, the rule is that you get so many meals in the cafeteria per week, plus an additional amount that you can use to buy food at the nicer places they serve it. But I've never known one of those places to be an IHOP. Must be a fancy school. If you went to a cheaper school, could you get a Waffle House or a Denny's? Because that would be an objectively better deal, and probably the best argument for taking on fewer student loans. Story 9. Worked at a restaurant where we had a promotion during the holidays. If you bought a $25 gift card, you get a $5 gift card as well as a bottle of sauce. I bought a ton of gift cards with my own money. I got the extra $5 gift cards and bottles, sold the bottles of sauce for cheap on a local garage sale site. They retail for $8 from the restaurant. I also use the gift cards on all of my cash tables. Customers pay with cash. I use the gift cards to close out their check and use the cash to pay myself back for the gift cards. So basically, it was a free $5 for me for every $25 gift card I bought. I also won the gift card contest we had. Be careful, a guy I worked with at a restaurant was fired for doing this with Groupons. Story 10. When George Washington lived in Pennsylvania, buying slaves was illegal in the state. However, owning was not, but only for a small period of time per the Gradual Abolition Act of 1780, which said that any slave who entered Pennsylvania with an owner and lived in the state for longer than 6 months would be set free after that time. Rather than buy all new slaves after 6 months, he would send them to the Mount Vernon estate in Virginia with his wife, and after a day they would return, and the clock would start over again. Obviously not legal now, but a legal loophole then, and completely secret from anyone but the Washingtons and their legal advisor. For no particular reason, let me take a moment to remind everyone that arguing with strangers in a comment section never gets anybody anywhere. Moving on. Story 11. My brother told me this one works, but I haven't tried it, so I'm not sure. If you get a speeding ticket, send a check for $1 more than the amount charged. They will send a check back for the overpayment and will not be able to report to insurance until you cash the check, as it's not considered a complete transaction. Rip up the check and avoid the insurance premium increase. I'm pretty sure that this is why most business printed checks will have void after 90, 180 days on them. They can eventually write them off if they get lost or ignored. Story 12. You can't do this anymore either, but when the US was trying to introduce the dollar coin, they were offering each coin for exactly $1, no tax, free shipping, in an effort to get them into circulation. People were maxing out credit cards, purchasing these coins for the frequent flyer miles, then turning around and depositing these coins back into their account, costing them nothing. I heard that some people got away with doing this many times, racking up millions of frequent flyer miles before they had to end the $1 with free shipping program. My dad did that. We have so many $1 coins, we leave them as tips sometimes in hotels and such, because it's harder to spend them. But free miles. I'm thinking the people who took advantage of this loophole must have been about the only people to have taken advantage of the free shipping deal at all. After all, have you seen a dollar coin in circulation recently? Because I don't think I've seen one in years. In fact, I probably see $2 bills more frequently than I see gold dollars. Interestingly, when I do see the dollar coins, it's almost always the Sacagawea coin. But a bit of Googling suggests the free shipping program was just for the presidential versions. I'd guess they weren't that popular, but it sounds like OP's first commenter probably just has them all stockpiled. But really, I think the bigger problem is that walking around with a pocket full of loonies just feels a bit too north of the wall for most Americans. Story 13. When your pawn has moved 3 spaces forward, and your opponent moves one of their pawns 2 spaces forward, so that it's next to your pawn, under the assumption that this means you now can't take it, you can move your pawn diagonally behind theirs, as if it had only moved 1 space forwards, and take it despite not moving to where the pawn actually was. This rule was added to chess because pawns originally couldn't move 2 spaces. The 2 spaces on the first move rule was added to make the early game go quicker. But that had the consequence of allowing a pawn to sneak past an opposing pawn, which would originally not be possible. So they added en passant. Story 14. Not sure if this is proven or not. Was driving two of my friends home from a bar one night. One of them was about to begin law school. We were exiting the parking lot, and there's a side exit that makes it easier to get back to the main road. The only problem is that there's a sign next to it that says, "This is not an entrance." I was hesitant about going through it because police were always around the part of town due to the bar scene. My soon-to-be law school friend said, "We are not using it as an entrance, though. We're using it as an exit. Go ahead." Best use of twisting words I've ever witnessed. Story 15. I have a cool one. My buddy overstayed by about 10 years in the US. He ran a company, paid taxes, no problem. But he couldn't fly anywhere, obviously, and if he got in trouble with the law, he could have been deported. Anyway, one day he got the crap beaten out of him by a taxi driver. They tried to press charges, but for some reason, they couldn't touch the guy despite knowing where he lives, works, etc. His lawyer found out that he could apply for a victim of a violent crime visa. He did, and now he's legal, and can exit and enter the country without fear of deportation. There's obviously more to this story, but that's the gist. I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Does this mean that if a person commits a hate crime against an illegal resident, they essentially make that person legal? This is an odd thought experiment, but I wonder if making that common knowledge would lead to an increase or decrease in violence against illegal aliens. Because you'd think that, wait, how the heck did he get into a fight with his cab driver? And how did he know where the cab driver lives? Okay, I don't actually care about the free visa story anymore. You gave us a story about immigration law when there was obvious drama sitting right there on the table. You and I might have very different opinions about what Reddit is for. Story 16. A case from the 90s in the UK. A man called Cheeseman was caught whacking it in a public toilet by two police officers after several complaints had been made. He was taken to court, and the law that he had been charged under was unclear in terminology, as it was from the 1800s and has old language. The section in question was that a person cannot reveal themselves to a passenger. Passenger in the 1800s, when the law was made, meant passerby. As the police were there on business and were not passersby, they were not covered by the act, and Cheeseman got away with openly spanking his chorizo in front of police. Story 17. If you have a tribal membership card to any federally recognized Native American tribe, you are exempt from Obamacare's individual mandate. The requirements for membership are set by the individual tribes, and some of them are really lax. If you have one ancestor several generations back who was on the tribal rolls, they'll let you in. Or you're like me and you have a tribal membership card, or at least my dad does, so it would be easy to get one for me. But your tribe isn't federally recognized in the US, though it is in Canada. That's what you get for being on the wrong side of the French and Indian War. Story 18. Here in Costa Rica, it's quite hard for foreigners to get a work visa or residency. However, it's very easy to enter the country as a tourist. The only requirement for tourists is that they can't be here for more than 3 months. So instead of going through the whole process of getting a work visa, at least 80% of the people I know here with foreign blood simply drive up to the Nicaraguan border and come back every 3 months, allowing them to become what is known as a perpetual tourist. I know some people that have been exploiting that loophole completely legally for about a decade. Story 19. Not so much legal as a nice loophole. Many Serta mattresses, others may too, have a 10-year warranty against losing their shape. I know that Sam's Club will give you a refund in cash of 100% the purchase price with a receipt. No questions asked. Again, other places may too. I'm on my third mattress where I return the old one and pay a little more for the next nicer model. Eventually, I'll either find a mattress that doesn't lose shape or I'll have a new mattress every year forever. Save your receipt. Story 20. I used to work for a nonprofit school that was funded by the state. There was a regulation that the school had to disclose how much the executives were paid, but there was no regulation against outsourcing executive functions, and there was no regulation against outsourcing to a for-profit company that didn't have to disclose anything, and there was no regulation against outsourcing to a for-profit that the executives owned. This sounds like fraud. I'm an auditor/fraud investigator, and this sounds like fraud. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely legalized fraud. The commenter sounds outraged, but I honestly don't know if I'm supposed to be outraged or not. I think the issue here is that the executives are essentially using the state's money to pad their own pockets, which of course is wrong. However, what I'm less clear on is how state funding for schools works. If they're given a set amount, then the executives are making as much as they would have anyway while simply hiding their pay from the public. It's shady, but not distressing. However, if the state just blindly pays the school whatever budget they claim to need, then these execs are legit stealing from the state, and by extension, its people. However, anyone who knows of schools with these regulations can out this kind of thing pretty quickly. If the staff's paychecks are publicly available, I imagine the school's budget is too. Find out what they're outsourcing and see who owns the relevant companies. If the state ever found out about a scheme like this, I somehow doubt they would consider the fraud to be, as the commenter called it, legalized. Story 21. I believe there was a man in Texas, assume homeless or poor, who got a nice 3 to 4 bedroom home for a whole $35. When the previous owners left their suburb home, I assume for lack of payment, he paid the fee to have the home transferred to him. I believe the only stipulation was to stay 3 years, and it became his. No mortgage, no rent, just a $35 piece of paper. Neighborhood was pretty peeved. I applaud this man for his craftiness. I think the bank booted him out, if I recall correctly. Story 22. Pretty small thing, but it's one I use really often. Stop signs in parking lots aren't legally enforceable. They're on private property and out of police jurisdiction. So the next time you're leaving Walmart at 3 a.m., feel free to roll through that annoying stop sign in the middle of the empty parking lot with no possible repercussions, you rebel. But it looks like these signs aren't usually enforceable. Certain states may have adopted laws to allow ticketing for private property infractions. Check your local laws before becoming a 3 a.m. Walmart rebel. Story 23. A professor at my undergrad was famous for his strictness and propriety. He had a handbook that he had written himself on the codes of conduct for the class that was at least half an inch thick. A real crapping diamonds type, and I hated the class, him, and everything he stood for. One of the prohibitions, spelled out in very clear legalistic language, was no baseball hats in class. I observed that rule to the very letter. Every day that term, I wore a sombrero. Story 24. UK heard that technically you don't need planning permission for stuff you build on your own land, if nobody objects within 4 years of you building it. Someone stacked hay bales ridiculously high, shielding his property from view, then built a freaking castle behind it. Nobody could object to him building it because no one knew about it. 4 years after he finished, he took the hay down and nobody can take his castle away. They're still trying to, though. Not being from the UK, I can't help but ask, why exactly would people be trying to take his castle away? It's not like anybody else had to pay for its construction. He wanted a castle, and he built one. Are British HOAs seriously so much worse than ours that you aren't even allowed to build your own residence on your own land? Or is one of the wealthiest families in the world so insecure that they can't accept anybody else living it up in royal fashion? Any Brits in the comments, please explain how any measure of hatred for this man's castle makes the least bit of sense. In the States, we have HOAs that complain if your house is an eyesore. But I'd think a castle would be way less of an eyesore than a castle-sized stack of hay bales. Story 25. I met a man on a plane who told me his best friend is a retired pilot. Apparently, back in the day, banks didn't exchange small change from other countries because it wasn't worth sending all the change back, so they would sell foreign coins by the bag by weight. This pilot would buy bags of change, and when he flew to the country the change was from, he would exchange it for a lot more than he paid for it. Story 26. I got married to my college girlfriend so that she could claim in-state residency and finish her degree at my university for like half the cost they would have charged her as an out-of-state student. I also looked like a very poor head of household on paper and received a crap ton of grant money towards my own degree. 10 out of 10, would wet again. Story 27. Right to repair. Void the warranty because you broke open your Xbox. To find the part you need is a pain in the butt. Send it to Microsoft. They still have to fix it, even though the warranty states that it is void, if opened. But if you opened with intent of repair, they have to fix it. Yeah, good luck with that one. Story 28. A German company should have paid 128 million euros to the government. They transferred the company to another mother company, moved everything into the mother company by doing some restructuring, and then deleted the old company. No money could be collected. It was in the news under the name Versluck. That's a funny name in English when it comes to the government in this case. Story 29. Even if someone smells like they've been drinking on/before the job, we are unable to officially say so, due to the fact we don't have a breathalyzer at work. When I found that out, I was dumbstruck. At my job, we have fully stocked kegerators in our break room. So yeah, we smell like we've been drinking, because we drink at the office. The first commenter's narrative sounds like a loophole, but it's actually just laziness. If the company has a problem with people showing up smelling like they've been drinking, and if the lack of a breathalyzer is the only reason they can't do anything about it, then just buy a breathalyzer. They aren't that expensive. As for the second commenter with the kegerators, I'd love to know what his office actually does, because that's either an awesome workplace or a PR catastrophe waiting to happen. Maybe there's a third option, but it's hard to imagine one. Story 30. This one is because of my roommates. They would rate a Pizza Hut nearby us and get a free pizza. Go down, get the pizza, rate the Pizza Hut, and get a free pizza. Basically, they never had to pay for a pizza from Pizza Hut. However, because they aren't buttholes, they would also buy other stuff, drinks, desserts, or garlic bread. Story 31. 123 Movies, Pirate Bay, Cody, etc. They don't have any pirated material on their sites. They just host the sharing of them from other websites and people. They aren't really doing anything illegal, and companies/the government can't touch it, especially when they're hosted in foreign countries that don't give a crap. This OP left out Flickstore, which is the best of all because they have an active comment section. There's something kind of funny about going to the page for any recent Marvel show and seeing angry commenters threatening to boycott Disney when they already aren't giving Disney any money. Story 32. I had a summons for court yesterday. Well, it was Martin Luther King Day, and the court was closed. So I guess I never have to pay for my ticket now. Incorrect, sir. Had a summons today as well. Apparently they mail the new summons date to the address on your license. Or you can just call them. Story 33. I bought a historic office building that used to be a school using a residential home loan many years ago. This worked because the zoning was R, residential. I put very little money down, had low payments, and kept the whole transaction simple. Bought it for $400,000, sold it for $800,000, and legally used it for my office for 4 years. Story 34. So me and my roommate both have Xbox Ones and play a lot of the same games. Instead of having to pay $60 for a game, we both set the other's Xbox as our home Xbox and continue to sign in and play on our own Xbox. So when one of us buys a game, it automatically downloads on the other. Also, gold is shared. Maybe this OP knows something about Xbox that I don't, but I think this isn't so much a loophole as it is doing extra steps for no reason. I buy pre-owned games all the time, and I've never had a problem installing them just because they were attached to another Xbox. Maybe this OP meant that they buy the games through the Xbox store, but in that case, they're wasting money anyway by constantly paying full price for a game that you could get cheaper pre-owned by the time it's patched enough to actually be playable. Sure, in the store, a newer pre-owned game might still be $50, whereas online, this OP's hack means you're paying $30 each, but if you install the game on both Xboxes and split the cost, aren't you each saving $5? Someone in the comments will disagree with this, I'm sure. Either way, the gold thing is solid. It's also how literally every group of roommates has been treating Xbox Gold and Netflix since forever. Story 35. This cop told someone I knew that if someone broke into your house, you could kill them as opposed to injuring them to avoid an excessive force lawsuit. If they're dead, it's your word against his, and he's dead and you're the victim. Word to the wise, check this with your police department if you live anywhere but Texas. I asked the cops in California about this once, and they said I had literally no rights other than calling the police. And if you do live in Texas, make sure they're actually in the house. If you shoot them on the front lawn, it's best to drag them inside. It's a hassle, but on the plus side, my house hasn't been egged on Halloween in quite some time. Story 36. Want to live in Europe without a visa or legal rights to do so? Do you want to work in a highly paid European country but don't want to bother with getting a visa? Go to Svalbard in Norway. Anyone can work or live there indefinitely without a visa. Story 37. If you tell them it's for a bird, you get free bread at Subway. There are two types of people in this world, those that know Mitch Hedberg and those that need to hurry up and discover him. There are 6 ducks outside and they all want sun chips. Story 38. I work at an outdoor market and we serve beer. We get past the laws by selling a token that the beer stand next to us happens to trade for a beer. Then they bring the tokens to us and we give them money. Story 39. If you have any sort of hobby that you can show is profitable, you can claim it on your taxes. IRS will see it as a small business for about 5 years. Obviously, you don't want to do this if it is profitable. It's just a backdoor way to get a little refund from a hobby. I feel like this OP secretly works for the IRS as an auditor and just feels like they aren't given enough to do. I'm not saying this wouldn't work. I'm just saying that telling people to commit tax fraud for what amounts to a relatively small refund is weird enough already. But then they offer very little detail on how to do this effectively. In fact, they make it very confusing. I need to be able to show my hobby is profitable, but I shouldn't do this if my hobby is profitable. And if it's a side hustle, it'll be subject to self-employment taxes, which are the absolute worst, because the US ironically hates anyone trying to carve a new niche in the economy. In any case, I work on YouTube. My entire life is making profits from a hobby that isn't all that profitable. You aren't giving me a life hack, you're just describing the source of my depression every tax season. Sorry for the rant, I have a tendency to write these while I'm in line at Wendy's. Story 40. Not as deep, but ordering a triple steak burger from Steak 'n Shake, $3.99 value menu with fries. Then ask for it on sourdough bread and add Frisco sauce. Boom, triple Frisco burger and fries for less than a Frisco melt. Story 41. Want a handgun but aren't 21? Private gun sales in a lot of states are 18 and older, including handguns. That's how I got mine, and it's totally legal in my state, given that you're not a felon, obviously. Look, I hate to be that guy, but if you're less than 21 and already a felon, you might have bigger priorities in life than getting your hands on a gun. I don't want to spark a whole gun control debate in the comments. That's not what this is about. If you want a gun and can get a gun, neat. But maybe just sort out your life first. Unless you're expecting an active shooter situation at the labor hall, this shouldn't be a concern for quite some time. Story 42. I know that a lot of law enforcement agencies the world over have trouble getting the perpetrator if they have an identical twin who's willing to also say they did it. People have walked free because of it. Have they? Because a bulldog prosecutor might also be able to prove they're co-conspirators, which in a case like this, they legitimately are. The DA where I live is actually quite well known for arguing that case. Every criminal, even the guilty ones, has the right to a defense. But maybe choose a defense that won't land somebody else behind bars if it goes south. I feel like I've been offering commentary on more stories than usual in this video, but that's because so many of these are offering the worst advice imaginable. If you hate your twin more than Max Thunderman, then by all means, listen to this OP. Story 43. In most of the world, children are actually allowed to smoke cigarettes. They aren't allowed to buy them, though. Similar rule with alcohol. Reddit once banned me for 2 weeks for quoting a bot, which they created by the way, that used the R word in its comment. But sure, recommending cigarettes and alcohol to children gets a free pass. I'm done with the internet today, but we fortunately have plenty of videos from several yesterdays, so please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.